Saurav. Thank you. It's nice to meet you. I'm really curious, before we get started, when into technical, when we bring guests on, especially guests that I don't know well, this is our very first time meeting, I want to know their path to get to this conversation. You're not a data center person per se, but you've done studies on data centers. How did you get from where you started to here in your professional role at the university, and then why did you think to commission or be part of this study or comment on this study?
Okay. So I came to the US in 2021.
Okay.
I went initially to SUNY Buffalo, and then I went to West Virginia University.
Okay.
And I graduated. My first interview was for Capital University, and the first interview, and I got the job. I accepted. I could have
Uh-huh.
waited, but I loved Columbus. And my wife's relative stayed here, so that was one of the other draw. And spending 4 or 5 years in a beautiful Morgantown, but it's a still a college town. I was yearning to go into something more, kind of a more city-like because I grew up in Calcutta, which had
Hmm.
like 10 million people. So
Ah,
more of a city person. And Columbus at that time, it was a city to me. It is still. It is a sprawling city, and I thought maybe I'll be here for 6 to 8 years, and
uh-huh.
then go back to India, and then continue there. And in fact, in 2013, 14, I spent a year in India. I liked it. In fact, I thought, well, I even bought a house there, and I thought, well, I'll stay back. But then, life happens. My kid he was born in 2010, and he seemed more comfortable here, though
Hmm.
he speaks English and Bengali well.
Hmm.
So, but he can't write. And then we decided, no, well, we'll probably stay here and stay back. And then I got fully involved into it. I got my professor. I got tenured.
Hmm.
Then I became a full professor in 2018. And, I have been in different things. I teach finance, so investments, options. I had a small investment management firm with my partners. And then in 2023, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, with whom we have a good relationship, they approached me about a study of Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. It's a sprawling public authority. It's, I think, one of the top 50 or top 40 in the country. And
Hmm.
you know that Columbus is having a huge pressure, like especially the Franklin County where we are. Uh,
Hmm.
People coming in. I think last year there were 22,000 people who moved to Columbus, and
Hmm.
how to support that influx. And CMHH, which is a public housing authority, has a great role to play. And so
Hmm.
we analyzed, and it was a good learning experience. I
Hmm.
haven't done a study like that before. I have worked with my colleagues before, something else related to economic impact, but never used the multiplier stuff directly. So we used something called the RIMS too, and I learned a lot of that. I spent a lot of time, and I had a nice team of PhD economists, and we kind of learned a lot. And then in 2024, I was approached by this Columbus Metropolitan Housing, sorry, Ohio Chamber of Commerce Research Foundation, Demetrius Thomas, he's the director. And he was asking whether, can you do a data center study? And they had approached others, uh, outside vendors, and the timeline they had and also the cost they had in mind, it didn't gel out with them. And I said, well, I'll you know, give me few weeks and to look at it because I want to see what I'm getting into.
Hmm.
And then I was reading about data centers. I know what data centers were before, but it was just fascinating. I mean, it was just those monolithic windowless buildings you see when I'm driving around Licking County and New Albany. Really, I mean, so billions and billions dollars of money floating in, I mean, flowing in. I mean, we think
Hmm.
about cloud as something ethereal. We're uploading our pictures to the net. We're streaming Zoom right now,
Hmm.
but it's really not the it's not cloud, it's not the ethereal world, it's the physical concrete silicon, and I would say a lot of steel, copper wires
Hmm.
that goes into it. So
Hmm.
I thought, it was something a good challenge to take up,
Hmm.
and I said yes. I mean, so we kind of convened, and he got me in touch with the data set, like the hyperscalers and some of the co-locators, and also like I started interviewing people from AEP, which is a American Electric Power, the one which kind of supplies power to uh, Columbus data centers. We still have
Hmm.
First Energy and AES in South. And then, yes, we started on it. We use something called the IMPLAN modeling approach, which is I can talk about it later if you
Hmm.
want more detail on it.
Okay.
And then we started on it. And then the scope was increased because they wanted to also look at what are the challenges we are facing. And I talked with a lot of industry experts. Some of them were named, some of them wanted to remain anonymous, especially people who worked in data centers. I don't know what
Hmm.
the huge secrecy is about. Uh, and then talked with EPA people, talked with the water department in Columbus, who supplies water to these data centers, and talked with John Williams. He's a head of data center research at Cushman Wakefield. Talked with some of the research colleagues in the in our academia who have worked or studying data centers. Uh, I hired some colleagues who were experts in public policy, forecasting and stuff. So Justin Ross, for example, he's in Indiana Bloomington. He's one of the experts in the country in property taxes, zoning, and stuff. He did the benefit cost analysis for the project. So kind of we had got a team, and you know we came up with an interim report in June, and then gave the final report in October. I think September. So it was well received. It was well debated. Some people tore it apart. Some people found real help with it. But a lot of things we had predicted. And again, economists don't tend to predict. We are not good at predicting things. But some of the things I mentioned, like the energy, the trend towards BTM, the behind the meter
Hmm.
generation, uh, the water thing, the move towards evaporative cooling to the closed loop, liquid immersion cooling, and
Hmm.
also the community trust. We've talked about social license, and that has, at that time when we wrote the report, there was not a single incident for in Ohio about community backlash or protest. But just before, a week before our report came in, we had this Jerome County township, which had a 9-month moratorium. And the things we put there that the community like, so power is important, water is important, connectivity is important, but community trust, building that is hugely, that would be a bottleneck I had forecasted. And
Hmm.
I kind of talked about having a data center energy council. Well, that was more energy focused, but would also talk about community benefit agreements, which could be mandatory, so that you build a trust with the community. I mean, you know, we all want to have the convenience of streaming 4K video, calling my parents in India, uploading photos. I'm now with AI, maybe making a cute cat video. But the fact is, they are what I would say. They're absolutely important, but we don't really want them in our backyard. It's like
Hmm.
we all like clean drinking water. That is perhaps one of the main things we need, right?
Hmm.
In India, we use filters. I mean, because but in US, and that's one of the things I loved it is that you can drink tap water, right?
Hmm.
So, but you love, but if a huge water treatment plant is coming opposite your house, blocking your view, you'd not like that. You'd love it.
Hmm.
You'd water. Same
Hmm.
same as with I think digital world living, right? We
Hmm.
everything now is. I mean, I can't imagine a life without digital connectivity. Everything is. We are all intertwined into this digital world. So I think it occurs the same way. I mean, you might not want it in your neighborhood, but
Hmm.
so we have to have some cost benefit analysis. We have to say you know, what is in for us. And we found that the benefits actually exceed costs. All right. If you're
Hmm.
looking at it holistically, the
Hmm.
benefits uh, exceed cost. And we did a benefit cost analysis. So it was fascinating. And the numbers I saw kind of blew my mind off. I mean, the economic impact with these huge million square feet server farms, which host like 150 people, but a lot of construction workers have this kind of economic impact. So that was, I think, fascinating to me.
Yeah. Let's come back to this. So I love that's the premise of the story or of the report. We are going to get into the report, but when this idea first got presented to you, I mean, you're an economics major or focused professor. You got these other things going on. You said something that I've heard a bunch of times. People who are not from the data center business, when they first came into like real contact with them, they realized it's kind of a mystery box. Like I'm not really sure. They're usually nondescript, at least back then. They're less so now. Usually they have a fence or something around them. I'm not really sure what happens in there. Most people will say what you just said, something like streaming or cat videos. What they're not thinking about is pretty much all climate change analytics on Earth happen in there. Your 911 system is probably in there. The formula for Coca-Cola is probably in there. Um, the sermon, the soccer match, even if it's from Sweden and you're streaming it 6 hours later, the Cricket World Championship is probably in there. Like the cancer AI models that are being run for St. Luke's to help save that 12-year-old are in there. Like I'm not trying to be melodramatic, but
Mhm.
our entire digital life, your banking is probably in there. And so, in my mind, that makes it some of the most valuable real estate on earth. So it should be nondescript. Like, at least that was the thinking before, right? The big players, well, we don't want you to know what's in here because it's really valuable. And so we need to make it physically secure. We need to make it logically secure. We need to make it always available. And if it's not, then it might become a more obvious place for people to direct their attention, and we don't want them to do that, right? And so it's this interesting transition over time that's happened. So why were you attracted? Do you think the challenge that was brought to you? Are you a naturally curious person, or did you say to yourself, "I really want to learn what this whole data center thing is, and really what's the value, whether it's to the Ohio Valley or Columbus in particular, or just whatever to satisfy your curiosity." What was the main impetus to really get you to dive into it?
So all the things you said, and also I'm naturally curious. Uh, so so I'm from Ohio. I'm invested in Ohio in the sense my child, he's ninth grade now. He's in high school. He'll be going to college in 3 years.
Mm,
Um, I have a very good social circle. There are a lot of Indians in Columbus, more
mm,
than 100,000,
mm.
and so I actually feel a bit like home. So, I
Okay.
visit my country every year. I teach at a wonderful university, capital. And uh, I, because of my academic role, I can go to India 2 months in the
Yeah.
summer.
Can I
And
just pause for a second? Because you
yeah,
said something that fills my heart with joy. I genuinely love this. Are you an American citizen now?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Since 2020, yes.
I love when people that are smart and capable come to America, become Americans, because and I'm saying this as German, Scots, Irish, generational, that both love their traditions the best,
Hmm.
the scents, the smells, the foods, the dances, the rituals, the traditions, like the way you get married, the things that delight you, and at the same time love to be Americans, to reinforce being an American. How do we make America better? And if nothing else, my neighborhood, my school, my store, the things around me, These are not opposing things. And I don't mean this as a political thing at all. I just love it because I've seen it so many times when people aren't trying to separate, they're trying to integrate and yet still be authentic to these things that delight their heart. And so as you're talking and describing this, I love that. I've got this strong connection to my roots and my heritage and my neighbors. And we are rooting for things in America, and we are rooting for things back home, and we're learning to live and thrive here. So thank you for that. Yeah, you made my day. Let's keep going.
So, but still, being a responsible Ohio citizen, I did want to see whether is this data center at that time, it was like a 2024 when I was approached. That time, AI was there. We have been using Chat GPT, and Claude was at its early stages, and have barely used it. I've used it maybe just to write emails or form emails. And so I really thought, is it the worth this hype? But as an economist, I'm a numbers person, and I really want the data to tell me what is going on. One problem with the data is that there is no long, what do we call, time series, no long experience where you can actually run what do you call regressions, where you need a minimum number of data to do it, or not many case studies. I mean, there are anecdotal stories and stuff, but there were like 3 or 4. You can't do a analysis with 2, 3 sample points. It's noise. So so I really wanted to see we wanted to see that we would like to give a objective report, not a subjective report, based on the data I have. And we did have struggle getting the data. I mean, we have knocked into all hyperscalers, co-location. Co-locations were actually more forthcoming. So I don't remember if one of my co-authors reached out to QTS or not, but we did reach out to Vantage. But the big tech are extremely opaque. I mean, they were not willing to say how much payroll, how much this. Of course, they were confirming, the numbers I'm putting up, which I'm getting from other sources, and they supplied us with the pictures, which I can put it on, on the report. But then, and I really wanted to see specifically what is the economic impact of hyperscalers and co-locators, and I couldn't get the data. So I've been running, places, trying to talk with the Ohio Chamber, the Jobs Ohio, which is doing a great job in Ohio, other places, Public Auditor's Office, tax information, AEP, because they provide most of the juice to the data centers. And we do models to map. We look at 180 data centers in Ohio. A lot of them were edge enterprise, most like edge. And we try to do the megawatt and calculate and come up with what numbers. But then like IMPLAN, which is the modeling system we use, it's based on something called the input-output analysis. We asked them about what we can do about data centers, and because we have really reached a wall, and I have those numbers, but we have to make a lot of assumptions about it. Okay. And they said, well, we have this data library where there is output data on data centers. I mean, the only issue was that, and again, we're looking at those industry categories which have not been advanced. They have been categories which are there like 25 years ago, 20 years ago. So they have this NAICS, it's an industry code, I think 52810, which consists of data processing service, storage, and kind of data centers. I mean, if you're looking at the output, I would say due to the Pareto rule, 90% of it is really the big hyperscalers, big co-locators. But it also includes these edge computing, enterprise computing, maybe an office with some server racks. So I didn't have any way to, they couldn't give me that disaggregated data. So I continued with what I have. And so one of the reasons my uh, employee like headcount seems to be higher because like 1 million square feet would only host 150 operational when it's up fully operational. Of course, there
Mhm.
are maintenance crew. There is always construction going on and stuff.
Mhm.
So the numbers, when it spit out, and we made corrections. So it's as I mentioned, it's based on uh, input-output matrix. It was done by a Nobel Prize economist called Wesley Leontief. Very interesting story about him. And he kind of came up with this like a recipe book of all industry interactions within a region. So region is very important. We did Ohio, so
Mhm.
the multipliers were higher. But if you're doing a region like maybe Licking County or Union
Mhm.
County or uh, say Franklin County, the multiplier would be small because there are a lot of leakages. So it's kind of gives a recipe, like for example, uh, how $1 or say Meta drops $1 billion into a New Albany data center, how that dollar flows through the economy, goes through the general contractor who hires a supplier, who orders a concrete, the whole supply chain. And not just that, the people who are hired, the direct operational employees, the huge amount of construction employees, those supply chain, and once they get it, how they do spend that money. Some of it remains in the economy, some of it gets leaked out. So, for example, when Meta is buying those chips, okay, I don't know. I mean, those chips, like the NVIDIA
Mhm.
chips,
Mhm.
are not built in Ohio. We have been trying to
Mhm.
build a fabrication factory, uh,
Right.
for Intel, but that has been forever. Uh, so it is a leakage to the system. That money does go out of Ohio, right? So we have to take into
Mhm.
account, and that is actually what we call it social accounting matrix, which does that. That's what we did. So we use IMPLAN for. But that's not the whole story. The story is because this 52810, that thing was designed, it's not updated every year, it's updated every 5 years. So the technology they had were based on how this cloud computing data centers looked like in, say, 2019. Okay. Now it was a little bit more labor intensive. It didn't use that much energy. The racks were like 8 kilowatts to 12 kilowatts. Now you're running 100 kilowatts, right? The AI racks, right? So it was not designed for that. So we talked with Implant people. They had a webinar. I think there were requests from other people too. So they actually had a webinar where we interacted, and they came up with a study, and they looked at that. Well, no, you have to change that SAM so that, or else you'll get highly inflated employment numbers and some of the other
Mhm.
numbers which may not resonate. So we kind of increased the electricity contribution to this much, the water uses to this much, increase the, things like that. The labor, we kind of reduced it. So we came up with so once we had that set up, we ran the regression, we stress tested it against reports which might not have changed that, like PwC report was a big one, data center coalition. I don't know whether, I mean, you know,
Mhm.
uh, if they modified it, but our numbers were a bit conservative than them. Okay. So at least we know, well, numbers are matching, so probably they are also using the same. And PwC is huge, right? I mean, it's kind of a like big four consulting firms we look up to. So as long as our numbers were not widely different, and it was
Mhm.
not, I think we were on the right track.
Mhm.
And then we run the stress test, of course, if it makes sense. You cannot have high multipliers. I mean, it means everything like the whole Ohio economy produces everything, right? So multiplier is, say, for example, any direct job, which includes construction and maybe the security person or anything who is swiped in that data center, creates about uh, has a multiplier of 2.58 in the Ohio economy. That means one job like that creates about 1.5 or 1.6 extra jobs
Mhm.
uh, in the Ohio economy. So it's like
Mhm.
this, throwing a rock in a still pool So the initial splash is the direct effect. That's the
Hmm.
construction workers, the direct construction workers, and the operation people in the uh, data center. And then you have ripples, right? The ripples are the indirect effects. And then from the indirect effects, those supply chain, the people who are working in construction, they spend money. Those are household spending. They're spending to buy a house. Once they bought a house, they hire a landscaper, they hire an accountant to do their taxes. They eat out at groceries, local groceries. This chain is amazing. And one of the things that the data center, though the headcount is small, they are highly paid. I mean, they are paid
Hmm.
well above the median wage. And so these effects are not trivial. They are large. And so, we did looked at numbers which were sus. That's my
Hmm.
son's word of when he says sus, he doesn't complete the whole sentence. And we did find that it was highly interesting that uh, I lost my train of thought, but
Well,
this
it's
were
highly
pretty.
interesting. I think to your point, it's you went in. In fact, let me just tease this out. I love it, and I think you're going to make this point, which is so. This was an academic exercise. You're a curious person.
Mhm.
There was a conversation going on. You put together what sounds a very rigorous program, both with who participated, your stress test, other peer-reviewed and compiled similar studies, just to to validate it. Like, okay,
Mhm.
are we directionally much different than anybody else? You go through all of this, and one of the outcomes was, oh wow, look at these effects. And I guess that's my question. As you came to the conclusion, once you began to believe we've got the right data, whatever it is, whatever story it tells here from our sample set, what did anything surprise you? Was there, and it sounded like that's where you're starting to go, this ripple effect of course, the obvious was the person doing the physical activity to build an infrastructure. But this is where it rippled out to, and you began to describe that. Was that the first sort of surprise or big story for you? Were there
Yeah.
other stories along the way?
So honestly, and that's when I first saw the PwC report, which was commissioned by the Data Center Coalition. I think
Hmm.
it's highly inflated. Uh, it was not. I mean, the fact is maybe because we changed the SAM, our numbers were a little bit more conservative than that.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was amazing that how it works. And then I kind of went into the district level. I went to Dublin, like county level, Dublin, New Albany, zoomed with
Hmm.
their officials and talked about it. And actually, I found that in some cases, our numbers were more conservative in the sense because implant does capture the backward linkages. It doesn't capture those forward linkages. What happens because of a data center is producing these things, a low latency data, this fiber optics? What happens? What industries come in? And that
Hmm.
was fascinating. I mean, that was really fascinating. I mean, there were a lot of what do you call signaling effects. You have these big companies, the hyperscalers also like Vantage,
Hmm.
like QTS coming in. That's a big signal that our region is robust enough, reliable enough, have gone through all these zoning permits to actually support this huge $1 trillion tech titans. It
Hmm.
gives a signal to it, and because we are close, about 20 minutes drive to uh, New Albany, I see these data centers. There have been a lot of businesses which have, and I don't know whether it's directly attributed to it, but the fact is, you have businesses which has nothing to do with data centers. Nothing.
Hmm.
Like, for example, Amgen. They put about $1.2 billion in, and that number might have increased, which hired like 600 people. Amgen, because when you think about these big pharma companies, they would not grow it in Ohio. Ohio is not even in the map.
Hmm.
They would do it in Boston, maybe the Carolina, North Carolina, or Silicon Valley,
Hmm.
but or Austin. But why? why in Ohio? I mean, why in
Mhm.
Ohio, right? So, uh, I think it helps the visibility of these companies we have trusted and trusted, putting billions and billions and I mean, $40 billion, 40 to 50.
Mhm.
It is like the size of the GDP of Estonia, Latvia, Bahrain. They're putting it in one like 50 square mile, like, or maybe 100 square
Right.
mile radius around Columbus. Those are big, big, assurance or signals.
Mhm.
My study couldn't capture that. I mean, those are,
Mhm.
I didn't do the forward linkages. But again, on the other end, there are things which could happen because economic impact modeling, and I wanted to be straightforward, is
Mhm.
that it depends on a couple of things. It looks at what is called the production function, like the social accounting matrix, which is, as I said, a done every 5 years. That
Mhm.
whole production function is changed. But the way our industry is evolving, it is changing so much. I mean,
Mhm.
so if you and you were in this, you were with QTS, and like for
Mhm.
example, in 2020, 21, the cooling system, it was all evaporated.
Mhm.
Absolutely, the structure, the race floors were so different.
Mhm.
Now the new ones we are seeing are actually going into liquid immersion cooling, where you are using a dielectric fluid and dipping that like
Mhm.
direct chip to uh, in a cooling effect. And
Mhm.
those require huge different structures. The production
Mhm.
function would change. So the model we have used, and that's best we can do, is a static model. Okay, so it's best, it's like you're taking a picture of the current state and then giving it. So that's one thing. So that's and all economic impact studies like recognize that. That's kind of all the industry does that. So if
Mhm.
everybody is doing that, I'm doing that. And
Mhm.
also the other thing is the model is static, and that is something very difficult to undo it unless you do some arbitrary assumptions. Is uh, it assumes that the supply of labor and inputs it's infinite. Okay, it's you want labor, you get it. Okay,
Mhm.
and without changing the price. But in reality, and I know in Columbus, I know I have a MBA student who works for one of the construction companies. He actually moved to Columbus in the
Mhm.
same company, and he says like there's a labor shortage. Now, that's not being captured by the implant modeling. And because of the labor shortage, the one you're hiring, you have to pay 40% more, to attract people. So those things are not there. So I'm saying overall, so we have this positive, what do you call externalities, Amgen
Mhm.
coming in, and a few other examples I can give you later. And then you have this negative externalities. And maybe you were saying, well, the electricity price is going up. So that is a negative, I would say, externality. Okay.
Mhm.
Negative amenity.
Mhm.
So how do you do that? I mean, uh, it's difficult. So given the
Mhm.
limited data we have, we are not making assumptions which are
Mhm.
not rooted in literature review and one of the things is because it's something new,
Mhm.
maybe if I'm doing it 10 years later, I have a better idea about how those production functions work and stuff. But given with that and given with other uh, economic impact studies I've seen, our study was pretty robust.
Why do you think Ohio? Like you had mentioned before, Loudoun County, obviously data center capital of the world. There are other big data center metropolitan areas. Phoenix is one. Dallas Fort Worth is another. Atlanta is a pretty good size. Certainly, these are growing. They're not quite the thriving data center hub of Morgantown, West Virginia, that you started off in the beginning, which has great
Oh,
snow skiing and great dirt bike racing, not
I
nearby. It's a
love my
wonderful
stay
little
there.
town.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a wonderful little area to visit. But what do you think obviously you got engaged because you're an Ohioan.
Yeah.
Why do you think New Albany or this greater area is so attractive to the data center world to be there that 5 years later, 8 years later, gave you the opportunity to begin gathering data and work with the Vonages. QTS is there, obviously aligned. There are others, more coming. The big individual hyperscalers, some of whom you've mentioned. Why do you think um, Ohio in general, New Albany, Columbus specifically, is having a data center renaissance or this growth spurt.
Okay, so it blew my mind. I mean, one of the things is blew my mind. I mean, Ohio, the just the 50 square miles of Columbus
Uh-huh.
is the third largest data center capacity in the whole of the US. It's
Wow.
mind-boggling. From the first half of 2025 to the second half of 2025, end of like December 2025, the operating capacity in Columbus area, metro area, includes New Albany and stuff, increased from about 1.9 megawatts to about 3.15. That's a 57% increase. Now,
Mhm.
why? So I've been talking with the early, people who have been here, who have been followed the this because I do have a lot of tech friends,
Mhm.
and I talked with AEP people, engineers who have been there. And one of the things which New Albany has advantage over even other parts of Ohio is the structure, the resilience of the grid, and the grid reliability. It's
Mm.
actually one of the pockets in the whole of the US which has such a wonderful, like 99.9999, the five nines
Right.
kind of
Which we data centers love.
absolutely, right? Uh, so that was one thing. The other thing I would say is plentiful water. Like,
Mm.
we're near the Great Lakes, so I think that's huge. We are having a very decent, and again, as we speak, we're actually trying to reform that. We have the
Mhm.
Ohio X Exchange. We're trying to have a better, even better dark fiber
Mhm.
connectivity. So that's there. And in fact, when these mega data centers are coming, they're also kind of helping to build it.
Mhm.
And I would say the very generous, just like rebates, I would say, the sales tax, the property tax abatements, which uh, which Ohio actually started in 2011 and then modified in 2013, that have actually drawn it. So it's kind of a combination of a very pragmatic, a manufacturing like state, state of
Mhm.
Ohio. It was reliable uh, electricity, electric power, cheap electric power, cheaper land. Now it has increased like fourfold, obviously. Water, plentiful water, and seems to have the people at that time. And again, they had less clue about what data centers are. Were more receptive to
Mm.
okay, that's great, that's data centers, and I can see it in like examples where this clustering, this agglomeration effect has taken place. Like New Albany, for example, I'm a kind of because I stay close by, I know about it. So just to give an example, and again, those things were not captured by the economic impact study because the forward linkages. So, for
Mhm.
example, a company like Meta needs huge amount of those servers. I mean, you have Vertiv, which is actually in Westerville, very close by,
Right.
but you also need like very specialized, maybe very customized servers and stuff, electrical equipments. And they used to buy stuff from Cupertino Electric, okay,
Mm.
which was based in, I think, San Jose, right?
Mhm.
I think they are bought by Quanta now. But the Cupertino Electrics found, well, it's tremendously expensive to make those things in Cupertino, like, sorry, in
Mhm.
California,
Right.
ship
And
them
then ship them.
with diesel trucks and stuff.
Right.
So why not, if we have this multi-year contract with Meta, and we know there is a cluster of other uh, data centers here, let's build a shop here. So they leased a huge manufacturing facility. I think their headquarters is Reynoldsburg, which is pretty close to New Albany. And they brought their people, they brought highly trained people who have trained people here. Uh, I mean, those things I have seen, those are forward linkage effects. And again,
Mm.
as I'm saying, these are not getting captured. I mean, those people who are working there, those numbers are not part of the headcount I have evaluated. I think it's like a good business. So if you ask me, it's reliability of power. Electricity is very important. I think
Mhm.
that's one of the first thing. Then water, fiscal incentives, and I would say more proactive government, which are not reflexive, they're proactive, pragmatic, because they
Mhm.
know uh, data centers are the means of production for the next century. And if I can digress a little bit, I was
Yeah.
reading an interesting article. Data center investments, AI data, not just AI, data center investments account for 1.2% of GDP. 1.2% of GDP. And I'm talking about 20
Today,
today.
today, and we're growing.
It's growing. In fact,
Yeah.
the GDP growth last quarter or the quarter before, if you remove the data centers, we barely grew. We
Right.
just barely grew. And just to give a perspective of it, the huge telecom boom and the fiber community activity boom in during the dot-com era and early 2000 was 1.1% of GDP. And
Mhm.
this 1.2% of GDP you're talking about is already growing. And so we're looking at, we have never seen this unprecedented move in capital ever in the US in this century. We have to go way back to the 19th centuries when we had this rail yard, the rail
Right.
network.
Hmm.
Then when actually it went to 2.6% of GDP, which was really high, we probably only able to catch it. But this, I mean, obviously, I mean, data centers are something. They are the means of production for this digital age. I mean, I'm not going as far as which I think Dario Amodei, the person I follow, he's from
Hmm.
Claude. He
Hmm.
mentioned data centers are like country of geniuses, right? But I'm not going as far as that. Who
Right.
knows? He said
Right.
instead of having those, we can have all those Nobel Prize, the best people in the world, put it in a data center, and the machines now, the compute would be can in fact keep coming up with output as good as them, or even better than them. Uh, so I think Ohio acknowledged it. And Ohio does have a diversified industry base. JP Morgan Chase has one of his biggest presence here. We
Hmm.
have auto is always there, the auto
Hmm.
industry. Uh, we have Marysville, Honda, and we have other plants too. We have robust financial services industry, a lot of, I'd say, insurance companies like Nationwide, Progressive. Then we have the limited brands, Abercrombie Fitch headquarters. We have P&G headquarters in Cincinnati. Uh, we have Cardinal Health. I think we already had a thick labor market where what I'm saying is, and that's another important thing, we have a world-class university, Ohio State University, and we have a lot of universities like Capital and others which could supply labor.
Hmm.
Okay, uh, and so that those are the other things which kind of attracted the location of New Albany and the Columbus area, the Hilliards, the Dublins, and all. Uh, so it's like a conglomeration of all these factors, and these
Hmm.
are we are looking at, uh, you know, trillion-dollar valuation companies, and they have done the due diligence. They probably would come up with more factors which I haven't included, but I'm saying definitely these are the factors uh, they looked at when they looked at Ohio. And Ohio has the first mover advantage.
Hmm.
Uh, and there are a few other things, and I think that goes beyond these. So, for example, in a few years, and I think it's already started, we would categorize that states with these kind of resources, with so much compute power, would be national important.
Mm.
So if you are, if federal government is trying to fund, so they don't distribute equally. We're 50 states, right? So they would look at states which already has that in power. Has that infrastructure built in. So the Department of Energy, the Department of the Defense or War, I don't know what it is, but if they're looking for a project, or like a huge compute power, they'll go into states which have those, right?
Hmm.
And we have world-class universities here. Ohio State University is there, Case Western, even not research universities, but Capital and other,
Hmm.
steady stream of workers. I think that benefits the uh, state in the long run.
Hmm.
Also, if you are, say, a congressman from Ohio and you're sitting in the Defense Appropriation Committee, will have a higher weight when you are saying, well, we have these. And
Hmm.
if you already have something which is very critical for the US infrastructure, these are critical for the US infrastructure,
Mm.
defense, our
Right.
intellectual property rights, our digital security. Uh, and these are, what I would say, the modern means of productions. They are like the railroads of the 19th century. Uh, so I would say, yeah.
How do you go to a group of people and say, hold on, I want to present some data for you to consume? In a way, they're not economists like you are. They're not rigorously trained academics. They're regular blue-collar people, many of whom I'm sure you know back home or here in Ohio, that they just want to understand it like a 10th grader. It's not that they're not interested. They just don't always understand the jargon when we use actuarial tables and all these other things to demonstrate. One, how do you have that conversation? And two, how do you connect so that people can at least evaluate the idea that you're trying to present to them in a way that's not intimidating, and hopefully they begin to think maybe this is an opportunity that helps us lead to human flourishing, because Ohio is starting to react to misinformation. And I'm not saying every piece of contending data is inaccurate, but there's so much noise, it's difficult for regular people. Well, is the professor is he just representing data centers? Are the data center people truthful? We've never had this problem before the last 4 years, but now it's tension in the air. So how do you help people understand that?
And are you saying, is it like, say, for example, Ohio, rural Ohio County, or in India? Which one?
Anywhere. Like let's say I'm going back to India. I guess the analogy for me, Saurav, would be if I went back to India and I was making the case about changing from filters to centralized water plant and all the benefits. To me, that is not dissimilar to talking to people in Ohio that might be alarmed at when you come and say, hey, look, we're going to build a data center. It's a big building. It's not far from you. That's true. But here's not just the economic benefit. Here's what it does and doesn't do to your aquifer. Here's what it does and doesn't do to grid stability. Here's what it does and doesn't do to noise and traffic and all of these things. These are the truths. It seems to me like when we go to people and we talk about change, whether it's changing how we do centralized water or we talk about centralized data, living in a secure facility we call a data center, when we disrupt the status quo, it can be intimidating, especially when there's activist voices activating it. So in either of those scenarios, how would you have a conversation? I don't suppose we need to confront the water thing in India, but it seems like it's analogous to what I'm talking about. There's a change. Yes, on the surface, it may look very disruptive, but in the end, in all of these ways, it's to our benefit, so long as we do it in an ethical, transparent way. Mm-hmm. How do you have that conversation knowing what you know?
So let me start with India. And
okay.
we are seeing massive investments which are flowing into India, like especially Mumbai, which are hosting data centers. They're still small. I mean, the total operating capacity is about 2 gigawatts, which is less than New Albany. Imagine a country of 1.4 billion has less operating capacity than New Albany, but it's growing very fast.
Sure.
And more interestingly, 100% of it is pre-released. It's amazing. I mean, we would die for something like that in the US. 100% is pre-released before a single brick is being made. But I would say, and that's kind of, so there was an interesting anecdote in 80s, which was that, Delhi has a lot of pollution, smog. Its air AQI is off the charts. And I've been there, like, I had to wear a mask. The ones I had during the COVID, visited my sister who lives there. And there was an occasion in 1980s where the British, sorry, not the British, the Indian government. I'm saying I have the colonial hangover.
It's all good.
The Indian government, I think that is the Delhi municipality. They said, well, we have to ban these industries here, in the city, because it's really creating pollution. There are some industrial belts around the NCR region. There were protests not because they're creating pollution, but because if you shut down the industries, what will the livelihood of the people who are getting work here, would go away. So the whole perspective disappears. It's like, for example, the use of DDT. which is banned now. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm sipping my coffee, and I hear about that. People in Kenya is using so much DDT, causing this and that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be again, oh, why they should, I mean, they should be more environmentally conscious.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine if DDT is killing mosquitoes, which create malaria.
Mm-hmm.
And if this happens in here, I'll be one of the first ones to go with this
Mm-hmm.
pesticide gun and kill those, try to do that
Mm-hmm.
using DDT. So the whole perspective is different. And for India, you have a population where the demographic is 35% of the population is between 14 and 30, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a huge, uh, like, I would say, working population growing fast, and they need jobs, they need work. And if you're a company like QTS or
Mm-hmm.
like one of the big tens, they're coming here and trying to open a data center because they find, well, yes, of course, government will be giving incentives.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, they will be probably more welcoming to it
Mm-hmm.
if you send a tech evangelist like you rather than
Mm-hmm.
engineers. I'm not
Yeah.
saying engineers are
Right.
not articulate. They are, but I'm saying sending you would be better than sending a pure. But it's just to show them, sit down and listen to their concerns, what they have, and be extremely transparent about what you can bring in the table, what having this brings in the table. Economic
Mm-hmm.
impact studies and all these environmental impact studies, they help. But you really have to listen one to one and be extremely transparent to them to give them that trust that this is a common asset. This is not a faceless corporation which is building an ISO or not in India. Noise would not be a problem. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so used to ambient noise in India. Here now, if you're growing in the middle of a cornfield, it would be a problem, I'd say,
Sure.
with the noise. But I'd say India that way is probably more forthcoming. You'd
Mm-hmm.
find at least little resistance on that.
Mm-hmm.
But say, let's go to a county in Ohio, like a rural county in Ohio, and the local government is bending their back to have like AWS or QTS in their backyard, and so they have the local government is like, well, we are getting all these, you know, because a big company is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens? We'll have a revitalize. Now the data doesn't. We don't have the data now, because this has been just been built 2 years, 3 years. But one thing is important is we have to be transparent about what they bring to the table. You should have those town hall meetings where you invite the person from AWS or QTS
Mm-hmm.
who would listen to the concerns and be very transparent about it.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a study which shows that recent study, I think, from two economists from Georgia Tech down from where you are, and their study is one of the most detailed facility level studies I've seen, and
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. I mean, they looked at that having uh, data centers actually increase unemployment rates by 3.5%, and the labor income by 5% because they, higher paid workers. They also increase local businesses by 4.7%, the number of establishment.
Mm-hmm.
They increase building permits by 16%, uh, and they increase the median income by about 2%. So those are there. But they also find one interesting thing that having one, and again, again, this is database, so
Mm-hmm.
I would trust there before,
Mm-hmm.
as for anecdotes. They said that the rural counties doesn't benefit if there is just one data center there. The rural counties start benefiting when there is a cluster developed.
Mm-hmm.
So and typically they said like 5 years, 3 years apart if it's this, because then you have that critical mass. Because say when you have a rural county, and that's why if I'm using a rural county, the multipliers are extremely small. For Ohio, it's 2.58. For rural county, it could be 1.2 because
Mm-hmm.
the employees, the people who are working there, they'll just drive maybe 45 minutes or 1 hour and stay in a city which has more amenities and stuff. So they're not spending local dollars there. But
Hmm.
once you have a cluster, and that's very important. That's very important because, and it seems that data centers actually grow in clusters.
Hmm.
So the first thing is important. You have to be very pragmatic, very transparent about this, saying that these are the things we are building it. We are getting sales tax abatements. We might be getting sales tax holidays, property tax abatements. But here we are giving this much amount. And in fact, I have outlined that maybe some rule of thumbs about those CBAs. Well, we'll spend 25 million so that you can put that in your school, revamp your roads, your fire department. So
Hmm.
also what you are coming with it, and to show that it's like a shared asset. You have the people from these companies like QTS or AWS in their chambers, in their
Hmm.
planning boards, in their town hall meetings. Have them participate, build that trust, which is very important. Okay. Uh, I do have examples for New Albany, what they have done, but
Hmm.
for rural counties, it's more difficult because say you are in a serene land, green cornfields, and now
Hmm.
you're trying to make it server farms, right?
Hmm.
You have this huge monolithic industrial windowless eyesore popping out in the distance. And you've heard those and I have heard those conspiracy theories, these data centers steal your thoughts. Well,
Hmm.
metaphorically, if you're using social media all the time, it will. But I'm saying it fries your brain. We have heard the
Right.
same thing about 3G, 5G when they came out. We heard these stories. But there are some stories, conspiracy theories, which are absolutely unfounded. I'm
Yeah.
not playing judge and jury, but you
Right.
have heard that too, of course. You have been
Of
in the
course.
field.
And when we start off with what we're for, not trying to be defensive, we tend to have much better dialogue than, but we should be equipped to answer the hard things that people are really concerned about. What I guess, sort of wrapping this segment up, where I have found the people that are most interested and willing is less about urban or rural, and it's more those that if it's true, if the data center opportunity is true economically, technologically, in all the ways that you've described, they're really interested in it because they're usually they're not affluent. They want their kids. Like I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, talking to the Rotary Club not long ago, and one of the things they said that really helped QTS and others have a lot going on in the state of Iowa. Um, in the past, our kids, construction kids, university kids, everybody in between, had to go to a St. Louis or had to go to Dallas or had to go to Chicago. Now they can get, for those that are interested, a quality of life that is similar to, or is similar to what they want here in this slower area, but they have an economic opportunity that is similar to those, and so they're that combination of things they're looking for, small town but big town job and career opportunity, it's really resonating. And we find that while I wouldn't call New Albany or Columbus small town, it is still got that vibe. Probably a lot of the things that attract you and your family to being part of that metropolitan area, in spite of all the people that have moved in there. I find myself in my town here in Georgia. I live about an hour north of Atlanta saying, okay, move to somebody else's town right now. We got enough. But it's because there's all of these opportunities. So I know it's a long worded answer, but that's how we're trying to pivot and adjust so that we have authentic conversations, first listening and then being able to talk about how we, in the way that's interesting to them, how we believe we're going to benefit them. And it may not start off with economics. It might start with something else. Certainly economics is there. And then where there's an apparent conflict or misunderstanding, how do we, in a whimsical, not engineering, these are the facts kind of way, but these are the facts, have that dialogue so that they can make a decision we hope that benefits all of us, right? That the data center operators, because operators like me, we want to be where we're welcome. All the infrastructure things that you described in the beginning are attractive, but my company, we're rewarded, our employees are rewarded based upon their volunteer hours in the community. We want them, we pay for them to go do whatever, their church, their food bank, their scouts club, it doesn't matter to us, just something honorable. Go get busy because we're going to hire from this community. We're going to order services from this community. This is our tribe of people. We try to be very local. Because that's who we are. We just happen to do human flourishing through data centers.
Absolutely agree with you. I mean, yeah, very good explanation on that. I mean, yeah. So it's like, as I mentioned, you have to show that it's a shared asset for the community and the company. And
Yeah.
these data centers are there for a long haul. It's not just a temporary 3-year establishment with construction worker coming in and then you're done if things go bad. It's like a Disney theme park. It will be there forever. It might be you're going to have a lot of server refreshes, a lot of changing depending on
Right.
the technology, which I don't know what it will be.
Right.
But you'll have a lot of construction, steady stream of construction workers flowing in, coming in, making the economy more vibrant, but also like things which QTS, I'm pretty sure, does, and this hyperscalers have done is get involved with the community, give them the
Hmm.
trustee, and help sitting on the planning boards. Like in New Albany, for example, they have funded incubators, where they've gone to schools where they have started training programs at community colleges, partnered with colleges. In Ohio, there is a college every 50 square mile, or even less than that. Maybe a state college every 50 square mile. So even if you have our rural county, you still have a college there. You still have a
Hmm.
community college or a college. It's not very difficult to say. And this college, it's a very competitive environment. These colleges are always will be very welcome to, have like status of a QTS or a hyperscale company coming in and having a training program. We could
Hmm.
start in high school. We can have something I think I mentioned in the report, like a data center in the box, show them how there is a rack, you have the computers, you have the servers, and you have the switch gear so that they can get involved to it because we are trying to train them from when they're middle school, high school, so they stay in that period. And it also helps that Microsoft or AWS doesn't have to spend thousands and thousands to fly people from Seattle or
Hmm.
California. So just to get that, it's a long haul. You be patient, we'll be patient. Definitely you will come up. The cost benefit overwhelming. We did that cost benefit. Overwhelmingly seems to be that favors like there's more benefit than cost. Now,
Hmm.
there are some definitely clear issues. I mean, when a community say approved a 100 megawatt data center, I mean, it's the 100 megawatt data center consumes like about 876,000 kilowatts in a year, which is enough to have 80,000 like, you know, uh, give light to 80,000 households.
Hmm.
When a data center goes there, the local utility cannot, just flip the switch and have that. It'll just cause in India. I remember when I grew up in 80s, if and that time air conditioning was not very popular in the sense because people were not that rich.
Hmm.
So that time when somebody started the air conditioner, we all felt maybe I'm like a mile from there, but I would see
Right.
my light flicker dim.
Right.
So the same thing would happen. But the fact is, when you have this QTS and these coming in, and in many cases, they're giving some upfront money or at least giving a commitment. Okay, we're granted to be here 3 years. So the local planning authority or the municipalities can go and make those big investments. And what are these big investments? Grid reliability, uh, advanced fiber optic lines. And who do they benefit? It's not just that data center. It benefits the whole community. You cannot have a exclusive this thing. right?
Right.
So to show them that, well, these are the tools, means of production of, again, I'm using me because it's more of an economic word,
Right.
economic parlance.
Right.
Means of production is, these are for the new digital economy we're looking at. Now,
Yeah.
whether AI is a hype, I don't know. I mean, I do AI, I have been started using AI for a lot of my stuff, uh, especially things which are more manual. I would have spent maybe an hour to do it. I now use Claude Cowork, which sends
Right.
emails or does arrange my files and stuff. But in future, this will be, and this will actually, I'm not a peer of the
Right.
data center industry. I'm based on it, uh, to show them that this really benefits them. Now, there are a few things which I think which came up after the report because I didn't have, again, I base it on peer-reviewed studies or studies which have been done very scientifically. Uh, so the paper I was referring to, again, from the two Georgia Tech economists,
Hmm.
they actually found that there is about a 5% increase in electricity prices, but not really. And the thing is, they found that electricity price increase is diluted. So the same electricity price increase is shared between 63 counties. That's the median county they found. Okay. So 63 counties. So the thing is, if you have so a New Albany resident pays the same amount of electricity uh, bill than the person like me who does in Bexley. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, do I like it? Of course, I wouldn't want electricity prices to go up. But maybe if you're looking at the trade-offs, electricity prices are just a small part of our expenses. But looking at the other things, the property prices have gone up. If your existing household, or like your net worth, the house net worth and everything has gone up. The convenience has gone up. Those all businesses growing there, that ecosystem which is being created, that has gone up. Now, so what other things QTS can do? And it's really a planning, or like a data center can do. It's really also involves a planning between the municipal and the city and this. The municipals can be proactive. And again, I'm
Hmm.
bringing up example of New Albany because you
Hmm.
know that it's one of the poster childs.
Hmm.
Uh, so when this big companies came up in 2015, 16, I think AWS was the first one who came up. They want big discounts to you know uh, to go there, and so discounts were one from the state, which was sales tax exemption, pretty generous sales tax exemption on not just on the server equipments, but also some of the construction and also property tax abatements. And how would New Albany justify a 1 million square feet uh, building,
Hmm.
which houses, when it's fully ready, about 150 people,
Hmm.
versus a 1 million square feet, say, Abercrombie Fitch
Hmm.
building, which houses like maybe 10,000
Hmm.
people? Okay. The income tax, which is about 2% in New Albany, doesn't cover that. I mean, there is a big difference between that.
Hmm.
So how do you solve this? So the people obviously, well, okay, we might see, at that point they didn't see the halo effects, those
Hmm.
signaling effects. Well, because of these companies, there are so many things which are being brought in. Uh, so they came up with a fantastic formula. It's kind of so say for example, uh, AWS or Meta or Google.
Hmm.
Uh, they pay something called the minimum adjusted payment. I forgot the acronym, but it's
Hmm.
something like a cost of doing business. And the
Hmm.
way New Albany came up with this idea was fantastic. It was a great tax innovation. We don't say tax is innovative. It's very dry, and
Right.
I'm not a tax person.
We'll
But the way
celebrate it.
and the way they calculated is they see what were the uh, contributions in the
Hmm.
tax or semi-tax form from these companies. Like, so there are three buckets. One is the TIF,
Hmm.
the difference between the original price and that TIF, which goes into paying those infrastructural bonds. The other one's like NCA. I forgot the acronym again, but it's like a HOA for a large corporation, right? And then you have those 150 people working their income tax, right?
Mhm.
And they look at what happened if this 1 million square feet uh, had this 10,000 workers and it paid them this median wage. What was the income tax they did? So if there was a gap, they wrote a check to the city.
Mm.
And the city has done really, really well. And that's something which kind of gives what I would say an assurance to that it's not bankrupting a municipality. It's actually they're not drying it. They're not drying the wells. They're not doing this. You are actually their money is actually helping us to, you know, as I said, improve the infrastructure, fund our schools, our
Mhm.
fire department, our police. It's a big success story. The other things which I said, and as I think Cuties can do is, or has done already, is so the story about New Albany is like you have these big tech companies coming in and they want to build that trust, right?
Mhm.
So in 2021, 2019, no, 2020, during the COVID, there were a couple of school districts around where the workers come from, and they had this crisis about they had to suddenly move towards uh, remote learning, which means that they needed all of them needed computers, Chromebooks, I think, at that time. Uh, and the school district didn't have a fund for that. They had to have a levy and then do that. So they sat with one of the boards. I think it was either Meta or Google. I forgot, and see how the money was, what was difference, and especially for low income kids who may not be able to, or who may be able to afford a Chromebook, but it would be costing a lot of their
Mhm.
income. What they did was they just wrote a check from the difference. So, boom, you don't have to go through all these levies and permissions. You just
Mhm.
have that. And there are other examples too. But what I think is what you're and what I mentioned in my report is you're building a social license, social
Mhm.
capital. Now, will there be issues? Of course, there will be issues. I mean, there was this, for example, you may have a sound like a diesel test
Mhm.
middle of the afternoon. You're
Mhm.
in a Zoom, you're doing Zoom. Again, it's not as worse as a tornado siren, which I
Mhm.
hate, but still, people are inconvenient. Uh,
Right.
it's a nuisance, right? Plus,
Mhm.
there might be some humming sounds, which has gotten a lot
Mhm.
better with the
Mhm.
acoustic systems and stuff, but they're less aggressive about it. Oh, okay, these are doing like Meta has funded this. You have food trucks, which companies have funded.
Mhm.
There are other voluntary things which they have done. Uh, there was an example where, and they again fund or give grant to those incubators. Uh, Let me come up with something came up in my mind and then it disappeared.
Well, what I think you're saying while you think about that is come and sit and listen to the community, and we will find
Absolutely.
areas of partnership. There once upon a time, the reason why they probably came up with the tornado sirens was kids and people were dying because a tornado just showed up
Right.
out of
Absolutely.
nowhere, and so they instituted something that now with modern technology, you're like, oh, that's so disruptive. And probably not a lot of people, unless you're out in a rural area, have a storm cellar that you run to because that's going to save your life, right? As time evolves and technology gets better, but we're trying to mitigate against a risk. I think to your point there, and where you started with this, I think originally was come sit and listen. Don't just talk about what you're bringing and the economic opportunity. Let's just pretend for a moment that's a table stake and you can get to it. Sit and listen. There's a reason why an operator like us is attracted to the area for all the reasons that we've said: talent, access to infrastructure, logistics, all the things. And when you talked about the solution that some of these customers came up with, hey, look, we want to operate in your neck of the woods. what does this look like for you? And the civic or the business leaders said, and the government leaders said, well, we get it on the one hand, but on the other hand, here's a gap that we see. And so what happened was, sounds like they had a collaborative conversation where they found a way ahead. We're doing that in a lot of parts of the U.S., I think Ohio as well, where I'll just speak to, I was on a panel not long ago with the CEO of Georgia Power here, and she announced, and we have publicly announced, we pay for all infrastructure. When we go into a thing, no county, no state has to pay for the infrastructure that we're building or doing. They've locked in different rates. There are a number of things that are publicly available that we talk about on how we address coming into a community. And that's not the only thing, but it is in response to people concerned about power bills going up that are unexpected. And yet the operators of these grids, whether data centers come or not, they're like, well, look, we want sustainable, for example, wind farms. Well, who pays for that? Data centers with a base load, when intermittent power is difficult for them without grid level storage, not 10-minute or 20-minute, but hours-long grid storage is difficult. But yet we fund 100 megawatts, 700 megawatts, 1,000 megawatt wind farms to connect to the grid because overall it lends to grid resiliency, and the citizens in those places where we've built it didn't have to pay for it. That narrative doesn't get out there. We pay for it, of course, to be good neighbors. That's what you're describing. How can you guys show up and be good neighbors? Just like you think of a fire department, nobody wants an emergency, but if you do, you want these good neighbors to go do it. But the firemen also interact with the neighbors in between emergency calls, right? When we do it right, that's what it looks like. And so as you were making those points and teasing it out, that's what it reminded me of. Be a good neighbor, listen to that community, work together to find the thing that fits for you as an operator to ethically operate in a community and bring economic prosperity, among other things. And for that community to say, okay, so how do we partner this thing together? So that it fits our citizens and geographical footprint. And now let's do it together, because we're not going to use less data as human beings. Yeah. These tools aren't going to be less effective. They're going to become more effective. When you were talking about AI, I just started last week. I've threatened to do this forever. I use actually 3 different AIs. I use them for different things. But with one of them, I began journaling. I'm now getting to an age where I'm like, uh-oh, is that a thing? Or is it just a thing because I didn't move enough? And I've had it start creating projects for me, and it keeps wanting to diagnose stuff. That's what I got a doctor for. I don't need it to diagnose anything, but I'm getting it to do pattern and correlation. Hey, this is what I was eating. This is how I slept. Here are my behavior points. Include this. And then yesterday, I sat with my doctor and said, now give me a 1-page summary of the last 3 or 4 weeks of my different health readings and that my dietary and exercise and sleep habits. That it's much better than my memory, and it's because it's recording it in this project. You're going to see, just like you're organizing your inbox and your email and your calendar and whatever, we're going to begin using these things like Jarvis from Iron Man more and more and more in an area that I'm an expert in. So I'm not using it to create an elevator inspection form for me because I'm not an expert. If I tell you I used an LLM to create the elevator inspection form, do not get on that elevator. But if I tell you I used it to help me find guests in an area that are really interesting to me, and then I vet it with my human perspective as well, well, now we might have a compelling use. So I just think that's where you're going, and that I love that you're reaffirming, be a good neighbor, get involved with get different groups, find a way to do this together. And when you do that, you more likely than not, you'll find common ground, or at least it will be very apparent to everybody. This is not the time. It may be too early to do something. Come back later. And if we do it, we can't help but help each other flourish.
I mean, I'll give an example of a proactive thing. So one of the hyperscalers in New Albany installed huge industrial fans, and it was well intentioned. They wanted to reduce their reliance on water. That part was still using evaporative cooling. So they had this huge industrial fans. and they'd installed it, and but the sound of the fans were like whirring, and you're having like a kind of a maybe inconvenient uh, humming noise, like a whirring noise in one of the neighborhoods, which
Hmm.
is in the close proximity to the data center. And the neighborhood complained, and you had a group of neighborhood complained about this sound. So what did you expect? I mean, well, okay, we have to do this because no, so that company actually went ahead and just demolished it,
Mm.
just removed it, brought cranes and fitted it into something
Hmm.
else. They spent $25 million in it,
Hmm.
$25 million.
Mm.
Well, and the residents knew that, well, okay, so this is not as bad. I mean, we had this complaint and they listened to us and they just changed it so that we can sleep at night,
Hmm.
right? Rather than holding, like,
Right.
handing them noise cancellation headphones, which you can't sit on, right?
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
those are the things. I mean, I think get involved. That's absolutely show it's a shared asset. It's prosperity. It prospers both. Like, as
Yeah.
you said, I mean, low latency, if they have this infrastructure, low latency helps a lot. Like, for example, in a rural county, I'm saying just example, they don't have a maybe a sophisticated uh, hospital system, and they have to depend on ex expert help. And so you're trying to do a surgery, a person
Hmm.
is trying to do a surgery, and there is a doctor sitting somewhere maybe 100 miles away, and kind of directing him what to do. That's
Hmm.
where you need the low latency. You
Hmm.
cannot make mistakes.
Hmm.
Uh, Logistic firm, what I'm trying to say is one of the big positive effects of these data centers to be near where you live is low latency. I mean, so you have this logistic firms, you have uh, assembly where you're making microsecond instruction to the robots to
Hmm.
do this. If there is latency, you have to ping it to Northern Virginia, which pings you back. The whole goes through all the switches and stuff, comes back to you in 1 second. 1 second can be a big delay for operational efficiency of that robotic
Yeah.
assembly plant. Other things too. We have seen, I've even heard like Columbus is having a bustling startup, like IT and AI startup stuff. In fact, I have recently have a company opened a company called Clouds. It's a file in cloud that's like uses semantic search, uses a vector database. It's actually brainchild of one of my close friends. He's a brilliant coder,
Hmm.
Gautam, and but the fact is, one of the advantages we had was this environment, this environment where you have all these other people who are taking advantage of this low latency and coming up with these things. I think these innovations, these things won't be there if we didn't have any data centers in the country, in nearby, where you don't have people where you go to a bar or a restaurant and somebody from Meta is talking to you, right? I
Hmm.
play soccer with a friend who is in Meta, right?
Mm.
Uh, so I think these are not captured by economic impact effects.
Hmm.
These are things which are, I would say, what I'm trying to say is maybe the rural communities would benefit or know that, well, you have this person who is from AWS or QTS, went to maybe one of the best universities like
Hmm.
Stanford or this. They are in the town now. You are
Hmm.
getting like advice from there. There are maybe coming to your school, giving a talk a day into the life of a data center,
Hmm.
or they're giving inputs of what to do on this, right? So these are big advantages. These are advantages you won't have if there is nothing, nothing there. So
Yeah.
yeah, get involved. And also I mentioned CBS because of course they would ask, what is in for? Okay, it seems foregone conclusion that we're paying higher uh, electricity prices, which is not true at all. Like the trend is like I was reading a Bloom Energy report that 33% of the one third of the data centers are now bringing their own power, and that's another thing Ohio has done very well. They have their House bill. I forgot, was it a House bill or as Senate bill has given a lot of impetus to this behind the meter generation.
Hmm.
We are actually seeing New Albany too. I mean, power connects, edge connects or power
Hmm.
connects. They're bringing one, which would actually, in the long run, would not increase the uh, electricity or would not congest the grid that much.
And many
Yeah,
times
I
there'll
think.
be peninsulas where they will eventually connect to the grid so that
Mhm.
you get even more resiliency. It's there might be some islands, but we have a lot of conversations about that here. The long-term thing that we like the most is even if you start with behind the meter, eventually as the grid grows naturally, as it makes sense to get these things to connect,
Mhm.
it just adds more and more resilience, both for the grid, but the capital investment came from the operators. And
Right.
now they're able to bring this benefit first to the data center because there's to have data centers. We talked about five nines in the beginning. We don't like single sources of anything. We like multiple paths and multiple sources in the car you drive, you've got a spare tire, right? You've got two windshield wipers. Of the things we like to have where it makes sense, multiple paths. But what I do like about Ohio is, again, in a bipartisan way, they have a conversation that says, how do we accelerate opportunity without putting environment controls at risk, without like all of the people have to come together and find a way. We know what it's like to be the Rust Belt. We've been part of the Rust Belt. We've participated in innovation that came through here 120 through 80 years ago. And then post World War II, when manufacturing left and all these other things left, Dayton decimated, Columbus decimated, Cleveland decimated, Cincinnati. Now, pharma and others came in and have helped. But if you've got a state with such an amazing workforce, and then the last thing I would say is you were talking about Meta, the Stanford train, the Calcutta train, all these different folks train, but they're also working alongside with the electrician or the carpenter or the caterer
Right.
who, whether they went to the trade school or they just apprenticed with a local shop or they're experts at window tinting or whatever they're doing, it's an intermix of all of these, either directly in the data center or in the systems that support the data center or the other critical infrastructure, or they're supporting the latency sensitive infrastructure that then spawns edge data centers a little bit further up, maybe out north towards Schenectady or over here towards Pennsylvania or towards Indiana. These are the things, to the point of your very beginning of your conversation, these ripples that we see that help fund this stuff. And what we're trying to do, and what I so appreciate from your report, because I'm looking at, we've been talking about 2 hours, which I love, thank you, is come and see, come and look at this idea. But bring your hard questions, that's fine. But let's do a real evaluation. Have a conversation with those directly and indirectly connected in the community, in academia, in industry, your next door neighbors at the soccer field. Let's talk about it. What are we for? What doesn't make sense? And is there a path forward where we don't miss the future of things, but we don't sacrifice the things that are most important to us? And if we do that, I'm confident much more often than not, we'll find a way that builds smart infrastructure that makes sense for all of us, and we all get to prosper.
Absolutely.
I hope that's where we end up.
It's not a what in economic parlance we say a zero-sum game. It's always a positive sum game. Of course,
Right.
there will be some negative externalities, but overall, it is looking to be overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
We need more data, but it seems at least the amount of investments being put to by the biggest companies and other supporters and looking at the things I use,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the future.
Yeah.
Again, I'll have to wait for hard numbers to come
Right.
back. We need that data, but it's so far it kind of points to that direction. And for the whole our country to prosper, we need to have them built here for all reasons, security reasons and others, rather than having these hyperscalers move to other places, outside the
Yeah.
US. Of course,
I
you can't
agree.
grow, you can't have all, I mean, it's economically impossible to create all data centers in the US. You can't.
Mhm.
So the market prices would actually like say, well, this is the number of data centers depending on supply and demand you can create in this country. These are the numbers you can create in this. So ultimately, you allow that free flow of capital across countries. It will be so overall. It's not the bragging rights. Oh, my GDP is bigger than you. We want everybody GDP to go up. I would rather have a rich friend than a poor friend,
Right.
right? So I would say, I think, yeah, we'll
People
see.
that are comfortable and healthy and successful don't go to war with each other,
Ab-
right?
Absolutely,
They may
rightly said.
debate, they may
Yeah.
take it out on the soccer field, but they don't want their children hurt and they don't want your children hurt. We find a way to worship alongside, to play alongside, to compete alongside. In all of human history, that's true. And when a disparate starts happening, whether it's around energy or data or whatever it is, it's almost an insulator when we have these things because humans, we don't want that disruption. So, Saurav, thank you
No,
so much
thank
for
you so
coming
much.
on.
You put me on. You made me more relaxed. Again, as I said, this was the first video podcast.
I really appreciate you coming on today. We're going to have links down below of how to connect to the study that you've done, some of the other things that we've talked about. We appreciate you coming on today. And for those of you who liked the show, click the like button. And if you loved it, click the subscribe button. Easy for me to say. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next time.